presentation. So again, I'm just going to put myself on mute for about 1 more minute, and then we'll get started. Okay. All right. Just close out some of this stuff just so we're not distracted in the background. Been a busy Monday so far. All right. So Premium Tech Tool, one of the best programs in the world. I'm sure you're super excited today to learn all about it. I can tell you from my experience that I love the programs I've ever used. Especially not that program. It's a little cumbersome at the very beginning, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually one of the better programs out there for diagnostics. My name is Daniel Martinez. I have been with Diesel Laptops for a little bit over a year. Prior to my employment here at Diesel Laptops as an instructor, I was with Volvo Group Trucks North America. That covers the Volvo product, the Mac product, the UD, here in the continental U.S. And I say in the Americas, so that means pretty much South America, Central America, and North America. Of course, once you get outside the U.S., a little bit of things change as far as emissions and things of that nature, stuff that luckily we don't have to worry about. And this program is designed for a U.S.-based vehicle with U.S. emissions. So just keep that in mind as you're using it. Also, this program, as far as Premium Tech Tool 2, is a continuation of what Premium Tech Tool 1 was, or PTT, or just Premium Tech Tool is what they called it. Once upon a time, Premium Tech Tool, you had to incorporate DCADs to your testing and programming, and Premium Tech Tool was solely used for diagnostics. When Premium Tech Tool 2.0 came out, when 2014 trucks started rolling off the assembly line in New River Valley, they came out with this program. Ultimately, it is Premium Tech Tool and DCADs incorporated into one. Because of that, it's a very, very, very large program. So if you have this program on a laptop with multiple other programs, you might find that it's a little slow and a little buggy. I can tell you from my experience with using Premium Tech Tool and using it at the dealership level, using it as a personal level, and even using it now as the training level here at Diesel Laptops, I can tell you that the program is very, very big. There's a lot of background processes that happen, and because of that, if you're using another manufacturer's programming or any other diagnostic programming on the computer, there's a good chance that they're going to not get along with each other. And because of that, you might find that you have some issues with connecting to the vehicle, things of that nature. So just keep that in mind whenever you're using Volvo Tech Tool, that if you don't have it on the machine by itself, I would highly recommend doing that. I know it's a little bit of a pain. I know the computer you got to use. I get that. Believe me, I get it. But I can also tell you that dealing with computer troubleshooting issues is not any fun. Unfortunately, we can't put that stuff on our releases to the customer. And so we always want to look at it from that version. What are you doing to make your job easier? You know, definitely whatever you can do to make your job easier is going to be the way to go. So just keep that in mind when you're using the program, that you want to make sure that it is on the machine by itself. All right. So whenever you first log into Premium Tech Tool, actually let me back up a little bit. Before you log into Premium Tech Tool, you want to look at this client update tool here. On this client update tool is going to be where you do your updates. Once you download Premium Tech Tool, you should be able to see that little globe. If you have any updates that come up, it's going to let you know. Now, if you notice, mine is a little bit behind on updates. We're at 2.8.82. This version here, we'll have to see here in a minute. So on this one, if you notice, and I can tell you right now with Volvo Premium Central, is that sometimes they'll put out an update. Sometimes they'll put out a patch right behind it because the update wasn't a good update. Unfortunately, it happens, right? It is humans on the other end of this, and sometimes we make mistakes. I made mistakes. Right? So because of that, I highly recommend anytime that there is an update available, let it sit there for a minute. You know what I mean? Let it sit there for a day or two to see if there's going to be any updates behind it. If you notice here, the 0.8.1.2, typically, and they're all about the same file size, so something tells me just looking at these updates and how close they are from the last time I did an update, that there might have been some buggy issues somewhere in there. With Volvo Premium Tech Tool, remember that this program is designed or was designed in Sweden, Volvo Global, and then it had to be translated to the US market. So when you're using the program, sometimes things don't really, because they're using basically the translation from Swedish to American or English US. That's what they call it. So just keep that in mind whenever you're using the program. Sometimes that's where a lot of these come in. Also, you have to remember that trucks in Europe 24-volt systems versus what we use here in the U.S. under 12-volt. Because of that, there's going to be some things that just don't jive sometimes. So be aware of that. Just kind of keep that in the back of your head. Once you see an update, let it sit for a day or two. At least my recommendation, you'll never find that in service information. I'm just letting you know from my experience with the tool. You just let it sit for a day and then do your you might see that another one comes up behind. Again, let it sit a day or two and then look for the last update. This one, they popped up three right behind each other. So I'll probably do this one today after our webinar. I just didn't want to do the update for our class, only because sometimes it is. So, with that being said, I'll take a look at just a few other things. When you log in, you're going to have to use your password and your user ID. You have this button down here that says synchronize user profiles and connect to central systems to work offline. Premium Tech Tool is a very internet-heavy tool. Also, everything has a title. So if you go in and change road speeds, change parameters, everything gets loaded to Volvo servers into central systems. That's all it is. All central systems is just a server warehouse. Think of it as a cloud. And that's why your information gets stored. In the event that there's ever an accident, any kind of fatalities, like that, then they're going to go back and look at the VIN number, and they're going to go back and see if it's not. From my experience as a technician, and I always heard that until I came to work here at Diesel Laptops and got our classes, specifically for us to show them how to black box data from the vehicle, sudden stops, and that nature. So it is something that is there. It is something that people look at, and that's why a lot of your programs do back up to also for safety, and I can understand why you definitely want to have that information so that if there was ever a fatality, that investigators can let your loved ones know what happened. So once you log in, if you don't log into, or if you don't synchronize your user profile with central systems, it will eventually lock you out. If it locks you out, then you're going to have to call us, Diesel Laptops. You get your program to Diesel Laptops, and then we'll have to work within our channels to get Volvo to get that done. If you call Volvo directly, you might be on hold for 3 to 4 hours. I wish I was joking on that one. Sometimes when I have to call, I call directly still just because I don't want to me, I don't want to take up the time at tech support where if you're calling in at the same time, I'd rather you get the help before I do. I can handle it. Luckily with these laptops, that's something that you don't have to worry about. If you got the program through us, call us, we'll work with you and we'll work with Volvo. You can focus on other things. You don't have to focus versus if you go through Volvo directly. If you go through Volvo directly, then you're going to be on the phone for 3 or 4 hours. Let us be on the phone. That's what we're paid to do. Once you log in, you're going to see your work order number. You'll have to put in your work order in order to continue away. I just put it very basic work order number in there. And then again, whatever updates you have, it will give you that version of updates. I had to just take screenshots of all that real quick before our webinar, because I know once I got to our PTT, you wouldn't be able to see this. When you first log into Premium Tech Tool, it's going to give you a few things. So the first thing that I noticed is that my communication unit is not fully supported. This is my Nexus. It's telling me that my drivers are more advanced than what I can probably almost guarantee you that these updates will probably work better with that. I can imagine that's where a lot of the issues were, was on that patch. So I wouldn't necessarily go back and lower my communication, my Nexus unit. I would probably just have the Connect tool, restart everything, restart my computer, go back into it, and then I should be ready to go. Again, if you're ever curious about it, if you don't feel comfortable doing this stuff, call us. We'll take care of it for you. That number, if you're interested, 888-983-1975, option 2, 888-983-1975, option 2. That will get you to tech support, and we'll be able to help you with that. So, once you get logged into Premium Tech Tool, it's going to do a few things. If you are connected to the computer, if you're connected to your communication unit, it's going to give you a green check mark that says, yes, you are connected to the product. The product is and also it's going to say that the data was included in systems. Ultimately, this is just meaning that you are connected to the servers. Anything and everything you do is going to be uploaded. Eventually, if you do not connect to the servers, it will work offline. But unfortunately, it's going to log down the program. It's just what it is. If you don't see that you're connected to the product, go over here to settings. You want to make sure that you're using the right communication unit. The Vocom unit is what Volvo recommends. I use a Nexus TSP2, also because I'm using other manufacturers' programs. And to me, at least in my opinion, the Nexus is tools that I can use with other manufacturers. Softwares and it's a good RP12. And I will show you a list of approved communication devices. So just bear with me on that one. So once you connect your communication device, you'll have to pull the program, reopen it, and you should be able to connect to the product. You can go into your configuration wizard. For this most part, you really want to do all that. If you need help with that, you can call in. In the event that you do have some firewalls, you might have to put up a network connection in here. Give us your local IT. Most of the time, fine. And then you have your system backup. You can run services in the background, or you can run no background services. The difference between that is just what it says there. One is going to launch Tech Tool faster than the other. It does free up computer space and a long time ago. I would recommend just running services in the background. This is the main reason. You want to have the program just on one computer by itself. I get it. I worked in the shop. I've done a public service. But in this case, you're going to end up spending more time trying to get the program to work than you will fix the vehicle and the shop. Time is money. So we have to make sure that our tools are working correctly. We have to make sure that everything's ready to go so that we can, as far as I know, nobody ever wanted to go and turn wrenches free unless it was for our own personal vehicle. So that's just where I would say just run that background, put it on the sheet by itself, save yourself the headache. You'll be doing yourself some justice. So ultimately, time is money. Save some time. And just what it is. So whenever you get in, if you go to help, and click F1, this is going to be where you can get a lot of your. Don't know where to go if you don't remember this webinar. Just remember anything in Volvo is F1. F1 is your help menu, and that is going to give you all the information you need. Just remember that this information in the help index isn't updated as often as the program is. So sometimes it does not match what's inside the program. Then I know it's a pain, but what we got. Over here you have the RP1210 adapters. This is going to be your Mexic, your Argon unit. I can tell you that if you do not use, or let me back up. If you use the RP1210 adapter that is not on this list, and it will still show up on your settings tab. You'll still be able to select it, but it will lock down the program. Unfortunately, you'll have to uninstall Premium Tech Tool, reinstall it. So I would just recommend using Nexus and Argon or Dearborn, at least for your local unit that comes with the program that Volvo recommends. Just keep that in mind. Now, what you also want to do is you want to update your product information. I'm not going to do that right now because, and it might actually do it. Depending on where you get in the program, it's going to do it for you. When you update product information, all that's doing is basically connecting to the systems, getting the information from the servers, if there's any updates, any configurations, anything associated with that number, then it's going to pop up in this product status box over here to show you that, hey, you have some things that not all manufacturers say that, hey, you have an update to PM, things of that nature. You have to think for the most part, you shouldn't really have to update it within the first 3 years or so. It shouldn't work on that. Not to say that it doesn't happen or are things that do whatever they can. I'm not just talking on trucks. ABS systems, what have you, right? Broad spectrum. But just keep that in mind. You have to update it. Once you update it, you'll see it there. Now, as you're using Premium Tech Tool, you might get to a certain part that it needs to see that update product information, and then it'll do it for you. When it's updating the product information, it's going to end up making the program usable to that product information. Sometimes it takes as little as 30 seconds. I've seen it take up to about 3 hours. So I'm a little gun shy at really updating the product information. Just because seriously we'll go through some of these other items that here settings is just going to take you right back. Manage software and move, we'll get to that when we get to programming. I'll show you how to use manage software. And then you have work offline in the event that you don't have internet access. You can put the program to work offline. You'll see a red X in systems, and then you'll see a red X below right hand. You'll still be able to connect to the product. Central systems meeting, you won't be able to do any kind of programming unless you've already downloaded that to the machine. Again, when we get over to programming here to look at, I will show you how to do that. So, once you got all your settings complete, first thing you want to do is log in. Once everything's connected to the product, here's the product information, product information. You're going to see a box that says APCI and Plus. Those are going to be basically just connected to the system. It gets called about all that's cool. Here, these buttons here, you have refresh, and settings tab. You can manually select if you want to connect it to a product. Keep that for that as well. So, when you go to product history is going to give you your previous work orders. You can go in, these are session reports. These are basically although to pick up where the technician take your vehicle to Volvo dealership. They only have about 4 hours to be clean. Notice, then they have to send a concern over to Volvo and have support check and try to diagnose this vehicle. It's easier for them to go in and look at session reports so that they can look what was going on. So that's what a lot of this stuff is as far as import and export. Volvo technical support will go in with these session reports. Open up the workload, look and see what was done, what the technician is doing, everything is logged that you do it. And they can see basically where the technician might have put in the wrong information or where to double check or even improve the information. So, in the event that you did have codes, you would see over here where it says DTC status, click through diagnose. So if you notice, when you click there, it just goes into the diagnose. Click that. Or you can just click this diagnose button, whatever you want to do. Now, when you go through diagnose, you're going to have a few different ways that you can choose. Right? So this one is symptom-based diagnostic. Have your codes, and then you have your symptom-based. Right? I love code diagnostic because at least now I got something like symptom-based. Basically, that's going to be a rough long start time, rough eye. Basically, anything that's observable by the driver, the so if you look at this one, let's choose one here. Let's say exhaust mode. Let's say that it was wrong by so it tells you intake exhaust into line. So, quite very smart. I'll try that. If you notice, you can click it, double click it. Click it one time, it'll bring it up. Click it another time, it'll erase it. You can select more. And we'll say that it's blowing white or gray smoke at the temperature of 2. Just click OK. And we'll say maybe some operation. Fire suppression. What these are basically different troubleshooting trees. All it is. If you have symptom-based diagnostics, you can use and effective that symptom-based. You just have to say checking that. And you don't have to worry about this, just hit continue. Now when you hit continue, it's going to give you a list of diagnostic public codes. So right now you can see it's reading codes. And we'll give it a second. All right. Got quite a few active codes, don't we? So when you're looking at these particular codes, just so you know why I have so many codes is because I'm hooked directly to ECM on a bench. I'm not really hooked up to the truck, I'm just hooked up to the ECM. In the event that I was hooked up to, say, a Volvo truck, let's just say a I-shift transmission, then you would also see your engine codes, your transmission codes, and you would be able to sort through control. You can go over here to filter, You can select either body control module, transmission, whatever one you want to choose. But I'm only looking at the engine. Naturally, only the engine show up. So what they do is they'll give you how many counts in that code. A lot of these are just ones. You'll see these little charts next to it. Sometimes they'll have pre-trained data with it. These are showing zeros. Now you can choose which codes you want to go with. So use just a few of these. So you'll hit continue. Let it catch up. And there we go. So ultimately what it did was it took all those codes and it combined some of them together. Any ones that had to deal with each other, and it combined a few of those together. So you notice these are active codes, did a few of those, you see diagnostic codes, sensor codes. And then you see our symptom-based troubleshooting. So we'll start up here at the top. When you open up Premium Tech Tool to the diagnostic trouble code section, with data link architecture. What this is showing you all the different modules of the and then which ones are actually significant. There's actually a few different data on there. This one is a subnet, J1937. Again, this is marked like that. There are private data links. Here's a subnet also as well, 1939-203, and then we also have subnet. Bodybuilder module, which is going to be. So a lot of times people think that, well, it's only just one 1939 truck. Actually, out of all of those, there's more than one 1939. When you connect your computer to the 1939 as a diagnostic connector, it's almost the same as adding a module to the vehicle. You're just adding a module to the vehicle so you can do it. Unfortunately, you won't be able to get into the design. It's just something that is not. All right. So whenever you're looking at these particular ones, click here for more information, and it'll give you basically a key for those. So let's say in this first instance, action with sensor diagnostics. If you don't know where to go, just start at the top. That'll group it for you. We'll say this one, active code, aperture and fuel pressure sensor, and then you'll just hit start. And so when you hit start, you're basically going into that troubleshooting tree. Now what it's going to do is it's going to read the, and I know it kind of overlaps a little bit. That's what I'm doing. Sometimes things just don't jive. So Premium Tech Tool, you just kind of have to work around it. So it tells you the current readout for that parameter. Because I'm not hooked up to any sensors, then of course that parameter is 0. So what you're going to do is you're going to come up here and look at these different icons. Your house button is going to be what you see on this first page. When you click the magnifying glass, it's going to give you a location for that component. And then when you click the schematic button, it will give you a schematic. Keep in mind, if you have a diagnostic trouble code, typically it can only be one of 3 issues, right? 1, the component. 2, the wiring. 3, the ECM. Pretty much it. So all you're doing in your troubleshooting trees, and you'll notice they all pretty much follow the same type of steps, is you're checking your power, your ground, and your signal. If it's a 3-wire. All you're doing is checking the component, checking wiring to the component, and then checking that the ECM is sending out and getting a return. Really it. We'll go back to the home button. Oh, and then you have this little back here, have this plus magnifying button that you can use. Get to a head, you can move it around. Plus button. So you have a few different things as well. It gives you your little meter right here. Okay, click here, click on the multimeter to view measuring instructions. So if you click the multimeter, it's going to give you what pins are what. On this one, it's telling you to measure in ohms, and it's telling you to measure with power off. Okay, as a backplane, we go back. Now, what Volvo is going to give you is going to be these breakout boxes. Okay? These are required tools for the whether they like it or not, these tools get sent to the dealership, and they have to use them. The idea behind this is so that you're not jamming meter lead probes down into the connectors, into the sensors, and spreading the pins. And the event that is happening, just know you're causing more damage to the market. Get you a nice pin kit, check the terminals. There is a connector check that you are going to have to use a pin kit to check the drag on the pin. This is also too to keep from having a back probe into anything. Ultimately, all you're doing is adding another junction box in there, so you can stab your meter leads into this box, to this other breakout box, and get your readings with the vehicle connected, vehicle running, so that you don't have to back probe it. Again, these are dealer required tools. They are the part numbers. You can order them from the dealership. Just to be ready to open your wallet when you do. So whenever you're looking at your diagnostic trouble code information, I'm going to step back here and then we'll just follow this down. You're going to get some detailed information. It's going to tell you what pins are going where, what the voltage should be. It's going to give you a circuit description telling you what's happening with that particular circuit. And first things first, connector check. For disconnecting these circuits, make sure your ignition is off. You're going to get these scary read them. It's going to help you prevent from hurting the product and ultimately yourself. When you go to connector view, it's ultimately going to show you that you're checking the electrical connections themselves from the ECM all the way to that component. Ultimately, you're going to deal with the power off. Go to the B87 connector. When you go to your B187 connector, it's going to open up your pins. If you notice, 3 out of the 4 pins are used in that sensor. Here it tells you to pull out your Volvo specific 998 pin connector kit. This is one that you can buy from Volvo, and I recommend that if you are working on a lot of Volvos, spend the money and get this pin kit. If you don't want to spend that god-awful amount of money for a Volvo specific pin kit, then there are other pin kits on the market. Diesel Laptop has one I use personally, just for stuff that I work on in my house. I still work on vehicles, even trucks on the side. So just because I've had a network of drivers, I've always worked on stuff. They pay me pretty good to do it, so I continue to do it. And I can tell you that the kit that I use is not a Volvo kit. I'm not just saying that it because it's Diesel Laptops. It is actually a pretty good pin kit. Go on the website, you can look at it. It comes in a hard case, everything you run to diagnose, not only all those, but other manufacturers as well. What you're going to do is ultimately use your pin kit, select the right size pins, and you're going to check the connectors. You're going to make sure that you got good drag. Unfortunately, once this connector is the female is connected to the male side of the connector, then you're not going to be able to actually check and see if they're making good contact. Typically, you can see if they've been arcing. There might be some discoloration on the pins, but nothing beats feel. Put a pin kit on it, do your drag test, drag the pin across the connector, and make sure that you're getting a good connection. In the event that you did find a fault, you put fault identified, and it's going to tell you to replace the connector. In the event that everything is fine, you're going to put no fault found, say test results. Okay, it's going to give you a little green check mark, and then we're going to go over here to the wiring harness. All right, remember, ultimately all you're doing is checking either is it the component, the wiring, or the ECM. That's really it. Next, you're going to go into the wiring harness, telling you to look at the wiring harness meter connection so you know where to go. If you have to check it with volts, it's going to give you your volt signal and it's going to tell you to put the power on. So ultimately, you're going to go in there, you're going to see, okay, wiring integrity should be approximately 0 ohms. At the connector, if you have anything 500 kilo ohms, to an open circuit. You see service information for the instructions. You have cable connectors and troubleshooting. If you have service information, what that is going to do is get you over to Volvo Impact. Volvo Impact is a separate subscription that you have to get with Volvo. This is going to show you your service information, your replacement procedures, things of that nature. I will show you where to find those documents so that you don't have to get the subscription. And I'll go into that here in just a minute, so just bear with me. So if you click on cables, connectors, and troubleshooting, it's going to give you an impact, and then it's going to ask you for a credentials. In the event that you don't have authorization, you're not authorized, you can't do anything. So on here, you're going to say, okay, now I got an open circuit, short circuit. I'm going to say no fault. Going to give you a little check mark. Next, we're going to go do our connections at our pressure sensors themselves. All right, so we check the connectors, and we check the harness. Now we're checking the component itself to see if there's something wrong with the component. So from here, it's going to tell you your supply to ground. How many volts did you see? You have expected value 4.75 less than 5.25 volts. So on here, I'm going to put 3.5 volts. And on the ground circuit, I'm going to put just expected value. And now what you're going to do is you're just going to take those measurements, put those numbers in there, and then you're going to click evaluate. And it tells you where the problem is. The problem has been detected by the sensor. It can be the voltage supply on the ground. Continue fault tracing, right? And then you can go back in and you can change this any which ways. Say 5, and then I'll change this one to something. Hit evaluate again. It says you have good 5, nothing coming out. It's going to tell you to replace that sensor. Basically, this is where warranty verifies that the part has been bad. I'll go in, I'll pull these session reports, and see what the value is, and then I'll match it up with that number and get it back. So let's just say that we had a good readings that we wanted to see on the sheet. All right, give you a green check. You're going to go over to the module now. And let's say that in the event on our ground side, we did not have what we wanted. Then evaluate. So the fault has been detected on the signal. Let's say we got. So it's going to tell you to keep going to the signal. I was hoping that it would tell you to change the signal. Okay. So if you notice here, it says you went through, you're giving it all the values. It basically locks up the computer because if you have a code and everything's reading right, how did it show the code, right? So at that point, Tech Tool doesn't know what to do. So it says, do you want to send unknown error? Do you want to send a concern report? Restart Tech Tool, restart the procedures. Maybe you did something wrong. If you send a concern report that does go to Volvo, sometimes they'll give you a call, sometimes they won't. Okay. We'll just put that the code is inactive at this point. Then it tells you no fault found. Do you want to rerun this diagnostic procedure, try to begin, or do you just want to exit it? For this one right now, we'll just exit. Yeah, and it gives you a little exclamation point. After you do the repair, it's going to ask you to verify that repair. That's going to be what helps it get it at a D rate. That's going to be what helps it to know that everything is correct. And then if you verify the repair, you'll get a little green check mark out of this box here. So let's say if we're checking, I'm going to go through one more procedure and then we'll move on to some other stuff. But definitely there's some good information on diagnosis. So from here, let's say we're looking at a NOx sensor. A couple of those every now and then, right? There's your schematic for your NOx sensor. It's a little bit more, I don't want to say complicated. There's just a little bit more to it than there was on just a fuel pressure sensor. We do offer an after training class here at Diesel Laptops. It is an in-person class. It's a one-day class. In the event that you aren't familiar with after treatment systems, how NOx sensors work, what's included in them, what are they looking at, things of that nature, I would highly recommend coming to our class. If anything, it'll give you the time to kind of sit down, learn these systems. I can tell you that we take some pretty complicated information and make it to where you can understand it better and diagnose these issues a little bit better. I can tell you that all of our developers, everybody that does these courses, have been out in the field. We understand some of the pain points that you see. We're not just people that come off the streets. Let's put it that way. Myself, the other instructors are really good technicians as far as diagnostics. And in fact, a lot of us did diagnostics only in the dealership. So we saw the pain points. We saw where the manufacturers were not really helping the technicians in certain areas. And so you have a bunch of technicians that came together and said, this is how I'm going to make it better for our fellow technicians. That's what we're doing. This webinar is part of it. There's not a lot of options out there for people to tell you how to use premium tech tool. I can tell you because I was an instructor for Volvo that we didn't have a lot of people that, unless you were from the dealership, got the opportunity. So it's a beautiful thing coming on board too. Definitely has your best interest in mind. So when you're doing your harness checks, again, you're going to go through the same throughs, and you got obvious faults, rubs, tears, rips, and things like that. You notice you're going to use that pin kit pretty often. Like I said, if you're using, if you work on a lot of Volvos, I'd recommend getting this Volvo pin kit. There's just these little rubber connectors. You put your meter leads on the back side of them, and they connect. And then they're using the same connectors that they use to make the harnesses. Again, just the idea is you don't want to stab your meter leads into these holes. I have seen instances where technicians had worked on a vehicle previously, and they'll put a meter lead in one of these holes and end up pushing the pin back into the connector. And then when they go back and try to reconnect it, then that signal is dead. Look at it, everything's fine. But when it's connected, it's just not getting that solid connection. When you have 128 wires going into one connector, it's definitely something surely that's enough. I've seen it. Made plenty of money on other technicians not doing proper repairs. Connectors fall free, go through, yes. And you'll just hit done. And then you'll go into your test instructions. This one is going to give you your warnings after treatment, exhaust systems are hot. Don't touch it, it's hot, right? They had to put a warning in there because somebody somewhere decided to touch body zones. And for that, I kind of laugh. I know it's not funny when people get hurt, but there is a warning there. I don't know. I have the personal opinion, if you know that exhaust is not hot, I don't think you should really be going this far into it. That's just my side information on it. I should probably refocus on the webinar. Okay, so when you look at this connector, just know that, yeah, 4 wires. Real simple. I can tell you whenever you got a 4-wire connector to a NOx sensor or any smart device, anything that has a small module on it, ultimately what you're looking for is power down, can high, and can low. When you look at a schematic, that's ultimately what they're having you check. Some things can get a little a little bit, I don't want to say confusing, but on some vehicles, in the event that there's a CAN fault somewhere else on another component, such as like a BGT, it can cause issues with the NOx sensors. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the NOx sensor. It just means that it's not communicating with the other parts of the truck. So just keep that in mind. That's all you're going to have to go by and check. And I can tell you, as you start doing these troubleshooting trees and get in the swing of it, you can almost start predicting what the next step is going to be. You have a little meter lead. It's going to tell you to go to your fuse. You're going to put one side on ground, one thing on ground. Sure, you've done that before. So just keep that in mind. All right. Expected value is 12 volts or greater. Always remember, always, 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 if you don't take anything else from this webinar, Volvos, just remember the magic number with Volvo is 12.6 volts. In the event that you do not have 12.6 volts, and unfortunately the tech will tell you this, you probably just check your batteries, and that might clear up the bias. I can tell you from experience that yes, the truck will start, truck will run, everything will be fine, but in the event that the voltage drops below the 12.6 volts, you'll get some weird codes, you'll get some modules that don't respond, you get some weird things with the Volvo that you won't see with other manufacturers. Sometimes it makes it a little confusing for technicians. So it tells you to measure at the fuse, tells you where to get a good ground point, put the value in there, say 12.6. Next, we can tell you to pull out your breakout box. You can measure the resistance. Expect the value 0 to 5 ohms. We're going to say that it was 4 ohms. Now, all you're doing is basically just checking the voltage according to power. Keep on going, and then it's going to check you to do data link resistance. The beauty in this particular schematic here is that it's showing you what else is on that data link. Just remember that sometimes some other issues can cause data link issues that will cause other issues on NOx sensor, such as your BGT, ACM, ECM, TECU if it has I shift, right? You have two terminating resistors. One is going to be in the ACM, one is going to be external. Good luck finding them. If you've ever dealt with data links and terminating resistors, you know what I'm talking about. In the event that you've never had the pleasure of dealing with terminating resistors or data links, I invite you to our data link class that we have where we show you how to diagnose data links. Little things that you can do to help your troubleshooting to make it a lot easier. I promise you, we built these classes because we wish we would have had help out. They really got a good group of technicians that are just helping other technicians at the end of the day. This is also showing you, this is kind of a new diagram. I wish they would have had these when I was at tech and actively in the field, because now they're actually showing you where your connectors are. They're showing you where the modules are. And this is the beauty of it. A lot of people complain about Volvo, but there are certain things that they do right that other manufacturers do. One of them is putting all their modules in one spot. When you look at the dash, you pull up your fuse and relay center, all your modules are typically going to be right underneath that fuse and relay center. Now, the only caveat on there is that they're all stacked on top of each other. So you have to unscrew each module. Flip side of that, if you're doing diagnostics on the data link, you're at every module right then and there. The only thing that gets a little tricky is the terminating resistors. And if you notice, they put that little terminating resistor down here in the harness out on the frame rim. Now you have to imagine, if there's a PTO connected to the vehicle, if there's two PTOs, if there's anything connected else to the transmission, to the back of the engine, you're going to have a little bodybuilder module. Let's say if it's a concrete mixer, auto hauler, anything of that nature. then you're more than likely going to have other wiring harnesses in there. They're going to be loomed up. Good luck to you. Checking data links isn't that bad. It's getting to everything a little bit. Again, you're just going to follow the prompts, tells you what it should be. Just remember, whenever you're looking at can high and can low, expected value should be between 55 and 65. So watch this. I'm going to put in here that I got 122 amps. Okay. I'm going to go up here. Next time, put another. Should be 140. Ultimately, you're checking the clear test results. So again, I'm just putting in some other information that it didn't like because of that. What I need. Just go through, continue, verify, I'm going to exit this one. Ultimately, the biggest thing you want to do is just follow the troubleshooting tree. If you don't understand diagnostics, follow the troubleshooting tree. Do exactly what it says. You'll get to the result, or at least pretty close. Yeah. Now let's go into one that is not a fault code. And this is just going to be a symptom-based troubleshooting. Say we have fuel quality check. Yeah, check it. Equip the fuel water separator. Of course it is. Control. Going to have you check that particular sensor. Contamination down. Take three objects. Of course, there's no retraction. Fuel quality within specification. Yes, get the best fuel in the world. But have you do a flywheel camshaft signal test. So, if you've never done a flywheel camshaft signal test, then probably don't know how to use an oscilloscope. And I would recommend definitely coming to our oscilloscope class, attending one of our oscilloscope webinars. We do sell our own oscilloscope. It's made by Pico. It's just like a diesel laptops. Pico, in my opinion, is one of the better oscilloscope manufacturers out. I don't want to say the best because there might be something else that I've just not touched. But out of all the oscilloscopes that we use, the one that we use here is. So this is a Volvo oscilloscope, 888-90040. This is one that is actually made by TIE, T-I-E-P-I-E. Or I might be saying it wrong, it might be TIE, right? Tomato. Here, I call it TIE. And on that particular oscilloscope is the one that Volvo recommends. That is the only oscilloscope that does work with Premium Tech Tool. When you go in here, it brings up the operation for you. You're going to start the operation, what it's going to end up doing is opening up the oscilloscope for you. Let's say I was looking at the engine. I'm going to open it up just so you can see. And you're going to have to go with the engine. Now, the beauty of the oscilloscopes and Premium Tech Tool is that it's going to basically check it for you. I guess this one, I'll show you the oscilloscope. You'll go in there and you'll check for reverse polarity, low signal, and again, we'll just say that it's faulty timing. And it's going to tell you to check the camshaft gear. On all those, especially the 13 meter, it's very easy off whenever you're rebuilding the engine. So you have to reset the timing. If the camshaft addressed it correctly, it's going to have you check your idle gear, or your intermediate gear, excuse me, and check the backlash. The backlash isn't correct on there for your time, and it can even jump a tube, which is, I'll put it to you this way. You can either disassemble the valve cover, everything around it, to get to the timing, or you can go directly into the ECM and check the signals coming from the timing. I can tell you personally that going through the ECM and checking the signal wires is a hell of a lot easier than going in and taking everything off the valve cover, especially if it's a Volvo short hood or what do they call it, BNS, which instead of BNL, it's going to be BNS, it's going to be Volvo short hood. Think of like your day cabs, your delivery trucks that are day cabs. Typically, half that engine is stuffed up under the doghouse. You would have to take apart the doghouse, look inside and outside the truck, pull the valve cover off just to check the timing. And then you're going to have somebody rotate things on the outside or you're on the inside looking at the back side of the gear. Sure, I guess it would be the back side here. That's a lot of work. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to work hard. I think work smart. In the event that you would rather work smart as well, I highly recommend getting this stuff. You're going to need it for data links. You can use it for sensor diagnostics, to check the timing. There's a lot of different things that you can use an oscilloscope for that we just haven't in the past. There's transducer kits that work with the oscilloscope. Instead of you having manual gauges, you basically have an electronic gauge that you can use your oscilloscope for. The diesel laptop oscilloscope that we offer is has a database along with it that will set up the oscilloscope for you. So all you have to do is just basically put the wires on the right, the right pins on the right wires. In doing so, it will pretty much almost do the test for you. They'll give you an example of what the oscilloscope reading should look like. All you have to do is compare the two and look for any anomalies or anything that doesn't make sense. The oscilloscope technology has come a long way from when I first started using it. To put things into example, when I first got an oscilloscope, Volvo, I pretty much had to wait 8 hours, or excuse me, it took me about 8 hours to teach myself how to use the oscilloscope, how to set the parameters, how to basically just to set it up for the test I wanted to run. You don't have to do that anymore. The technology is there. It's what your time to be alive, right? So all you have to do is say, if I want to look at a speed sensor, all I do is click speed sensor. I hear click, click, click at my oscilloscope, and a page pops up and says plug in here, plug in there, and this is what it should look like. All you have to do is follow these steps, and it's a beautiful thing. So just go through all your troubleshooting in the event that you get to the end and you still haven't figured out your fault, do it again. There's been times that I've gone through, I don't fix the problem, I go back and realize I took a measure of the problem. So it happens, I'm human. Sometimes I get a phone call, sometimes I have to go to the restroom, get some coffee, sometimes we make mistakes, and it's okay. Cancel out of that. All right. So what they go through diagnose is going to go and help you get to the solution, right? So let's say that you have to change out a component, but you don't have impact. So let's say I'm going to open up the web page, and you're going to go to this website here. Write it down. volvotrucks.bg/emedia.com, or you can just go to Volvo Trucks eMedia, emedia.com, and it'll take you to the same spot. It'll jump you over. Okay. Now what this is this is a website that you have access to. You don't need any special permissions. And this is where you can find your service information. So I'm going to go over here. The one thing you want to remember is binder. Remember the word binder. Remember those big, thick service manuals that we used to get in paper, right? Big old giant binders. Those 3 or 4 inch binders that you have to go look at paper to see your service information. The beauty of that is we don't have to do that. Everything's online. As long as we have internet, we're fine. In the event that we ever lose internet, then I guess we're going back to printing paper, killing trees. So when you go in, you saw I click show all. What that's going to do is put all these engine manuals all on one page. Ultimately, these are your complete engine manuals. So let's say I was working on D13F engine, and you'll click the link, hurry up and wait. Now you can click add to cart. You can pay $275 and they will print it out and send it to you. Or you can click here to show contents. These are your entire engine manuals. This is everything you need to know on that engine. How to test the EGR cooler, how to do exhaust after treatment system fault tracing, after treatment injector replacement, right? We don't ever have any after treatment problems, do we? And that was a rhetorical question. We know we did, honestly. That's all we ever do now, it seems like. How to look at your diesel particulate filter, firewall housing. Try to look for a few of the main bearing, checker. Definitely a lot of documents. Okay. Trying to get to the one. Do that. You always hit Control F. Tell you how to program the ECM in the event that you need to. We just have diagnostic trouble codes in here. I think they got rid of that mostly, so you have to go to Premium Tech Tool now. The one thing I wish they would have kept in there, but I understand why they did. When you click on that particular link, you can click View File, and it will download to your computer, and this is how you program. Okay? In the event that you needed to know how to program. Now, mind you, this document was made in 2010 with the previous version of Premium Tech Tool. So none of this stuff is relevant for this car. This still works pretty good up until this point, but again, take it with a grain of salt a little bit. It tells you PTT VCADs where you're using VCADs. Unfortunately, it's all integrated. Just take that for it. Again, just remember Volvo Trucks and Media, binder, and you will have your entire engine manuals. In the event that you want to rebuild the engine, you have your specifications on it. So there's a lot of good information on there. There you go. All your information. Learn how to set the valve lash. That's how you do it. Learn how to set the timing. That's how you do it. You should have torque procedures in here. If you're doing a rim in the field, changing the flywheel, valve cover, all your torque procedures are in there. Your torque specs. What should they be? What should your manifold be? Because I guarantee you guys are always looking at torque specs before you go out and start running bolts into the thing. Of course you do. I did too. Says every technician, right? So one nugget dugger, two nugget. All right. So keep that in mind. At least you know where to find that information. Like I said, if you don't learn anything, I promise you I'll show you where to find the information. I might not know everything on a vehicle, and that's okay. I at least know where to find it. One last thing I'll show you, because we're going to have to come back to it. Bodybuilder. You might have to do bodybuilder service information. And electrical system. All right. So I'm going to leave this up right now, only because I'm going to reference back to this document when we get to programming. You do have the ability to do some programming on Volvo Premium Tech Tool. You're going to need these programming worksheets. To use a Volvo, here's actually one of them here. It's going to tell you what to set so you don't mess up any of the programming. I don't mean mess it up like it's going to ever stop working. It's just going to get to the point where you might change some parameters that don't coincide with each other. They don't talk to each other very much. And because the computer doesn't know what to do with that language, it doesn't. These are the worksheets that you'll have to do. Just remember bodybuilder. Those are your codes, and I'll show you how to enter them. You're not going to find these worksheets on Premium Tech Tool. You will have to go to service information to look at them, to set them down, to set them up. Same thing if you're working on Mac, Mac transfer media, you can tell us still do a lot with both. And you're going to do the same thing, and it holds on. I'm going to use those documents. Product. Using the UD product, unfortunately, I was never really on that side of things. We just don't do a lot of training on that side. Specified. Then you have your different. Keep that in mind. Body texting media, night texting media. All right, so I'm going to leave that right there for now, and then I'm going to jump back to the Go through testing. You got service and maintenance. You can do vehicle information test. Vehicle information test, I'm going to run through the simulated. What this does is it's going to send out a signal on your battery, and then it's going to ask what modules are responding. So in the event that you did not have a module that was responding correctly, then you would be able to go in here and check it. When you open up this particular program, it actually opens up VCADs within Premium Tech Tool. This program that you're looking at from about this bar down is old VCADs. This up here is Premium Tech Tool. That's why the program is so big. Imagine if you were to take two programs and just smash them together and then come up with one program. That's what you get out of Premium Tech Tool. It does have some bugs in it sometimes, but what doesn't, right? There's everything. I even work with some people that sometimes. So it goes here and it'll show you your MID or your module ID, and then it's going to show you what that hardware number is, what the software number is, what the data set is, current road speed, a dealer ID for most recent change. Like I said, there's your title to them. So the idea that, hey, Mr. Diesel Laptops in Arlington decided to change the road speed to 100 miles an hour, and the truck ran off the road, killed a bus full of nuns, right? Poor bus full of nuns always get the worst of it in their business, but it's just the way it is. They're going to be able to go back and look at that information. You don't want to be on the other end of it. But some of the guys that have trained that look at this information, the worst thing you ever want to do is doing your job to trouble. So be careful when you're changing this stuff. Make sure you have the right permissions. Just because the driver says, yeah, I want to turn it up, just make sure he's the owner of that vehicle. In the event that he's not, it could be messing on somebody's insurance policies, creating a whole mess. Your company doesn't need that you really just don't have to deal with. So just keep that in mind. So you haven't learned how to reset. What this is if you change any component on the, on your after treatment, such as your EGR differential, venturi tube, cooler, temperature sensor, NOx sensors, injectors, boost pressure sensors, any of those items, the best thing to do is hit your learn data reset. And it's always going to give you a little scary is if you notice it pulls up VCAD Pro anyways, and it says, do you really want to do this? Yes, I do. What that is it's going to bring out all these components back to zero. You have to remember that the software is progressive with these trucks. It does have a little bit, especially newer trucks, and it's getting more and more, that they do have a little bit of AI or artificial intelligence in them in the sense that they're going to be progressive. And what I mean by that is, let's say if I take a truck, both of them came out of a manufacturing plant. One went up to the ice road trucks in Canada, the other one went down to Mexico. And I was to bring those trucks back in at 100,000 miles. And I would ask you, hey, is this truck, are these trucks the same? Answer is going to be no. Different weather, they've been worked a different way, they've been different types, they've had different types of through them. Quality of fuel in Canada is going to be different from Mexico, which is going to be different from that in the U.S. It's just going to be differences along the spectrum. Because of that, the software and the ECM is going to adjust for that. In the event I go and take a NOx sensor right off the shelf, plug it into the truck, now I got a brand new NOx sensor on there with components that are a year old that have miles on it, where this brand new NOx sensor doesn't. What's going to happen if I don't do this data reset? What's going to happen is saying, oh, look, people are going to say, I don't like what I see from my NOx sensor. I can only communicate in somebody's language, such as diagnostic troubleshooting. I'm going to shoot you a code saying that, hey, erratic data, valid, invalid, whatever. You're going to go in, I just changed an NOx sensor. What the heck happened, right? Ultimately, you have to look at that and say, okay, this is where it's happening from that NOx sensor in the event that you have to do that on a data reset. It's just what it is. Save yourself a little bit of a headache. You have service alerts configuration reports, tells you the distance, hours, things of that nature. You have fault codes that you can run. The reason why they put fault codes here as well is because of the data link architecture. If you remember when we were on diagnose, some of these are on the 1587, some of these on the 1939. When you're using Premium Tech Tool, you're on the 1939. The moment you go over the test, you're using VCADs, which is 1587. Sometimes you can have codes that only report on the 1587 and not the 1939. So if you see a check engine light, ABS light, and you go on and you don't see any codes, come over here to fault codes, run the fault codes under VCADs or testing. You want to do it that way. Then you have your oscilloscope. You do have a built-in oscilloscope here. Unfortunately, it has to be that particular one. I'll show you that real quick. Give you your handy scope, tells you where to pick it up at. You can look at these online if you want one that goes with your tech tool. Again, this is a Type I type scope. Okay, it's already built in. I can tell you that compared to the diesel laptop one, this one is a little bit more cumbersome. I learned on this one, so when I went to the diesel laptop scope, I can tell you that it was night and day. And in fact, this is a new button that they had, and that's why it looks just kind of out of place to set up here. This is a quick setup. This is basically the indexes, so you can set up the test. And that's the beauty of these, that you can go in there and let's say I wanted to check a particular sensor, I wanted to check a ABS sensor, and it's a Hall effect sensor. This one sets up the meter for you, but unfortunately it doesn't show you on the truck where to hook up to check that sensor. And that's kind of the difference between, I don't say that kind of difference. That is the difference between other scopes and the ones we use, which is the Pico scope or rebranded for diesel laptops. For you. But if I were to compare Pico to Type I or Type A, however you want to say it. I would rather go with the pico or the diesel scope because not only is it going to set up the oscilloscope for you, which is great, but it's also going to tell you where to plug in these links. And if you're not familiar with oscilloscopes, if you want to get to that level, we have classes to get you to that level. And I promise you, I learned a lot going through those myself. From some of the other instructors, I've never met a really good group of instructors that I've met here at Diesel Laptops. And I'm not just saying that. You got a bunch of people that really care about helping you do your job to the best of your ability, giving you the products and the tools to get it done. Even from the manufacturer, such as the one over this program, they've gone above and beyond. Let's put it that way. So if you notice everything that goes into a function group, these function groups follow the same line as they will all across the board, what I call Volvo. So if I were to go in Volvo group types, if I go just straight into service information, and then I just don't choose any of that, just go to all. You notice these pretty much follow the same type of output. Say you have service and maintenance, right? Service and maintenance. Engine mounting and equipment. Engine, right? So, not always, but pretty close. Lubrication, electrical, transmission, brakes. If you go into impact, they follow all the same thing, plus all your documents will all start with 1, all these will start with 2, 3, so forth and so on. So whenever you're looking at these, it's just a good way to identify what documents are, to make sure you're in the right spot. You can look at your fuel consumption data, you can look at your engine, cylinder compression test, right? It's usually a fun one. Is it a bottle line? All right. Just remember like your old VCR. If you don't know what a VCR is, maybe an old DVD player. What a DVD player is. Man, we'll put it online and start showing age here. Then you might have to just remember this is a play button. Top brake must be set. You're going to go in. Now remember, I'm in simulator view, so it's going to tell you that this isn't okay. Every time you go into simulator view, and that's the beauty of this program, you can put it in simulator view. If you want to just poke around, if you want to just see how this test works, just to see what's happening. Lubrication and oil pressure test, cranking, cooling valve, fuel tests, so forth and so on. You got electrical tests, you can turn on your ignition switch, turn on buttons, calibration tests, so forth and so on. A lot of good tests in there, as long as it has a Volvo supplied system. In the event, let's say I was using somebody else's supplied system, another manufacturer, then and it was only a Volvo engine. If you have a high shift, you can come in here and do a clutch wear check. Check your clutch wear. This comes in handy, especially if you do have eye shifts, in the event that you are having to change out the clutch. If you are doing a clutch, I guess a clutch replacement would be it. You have to do the gear activation for the control housing, so you can take the control housing off or the clutch activation, depending on what you're doing. If you're replacing the transmission, then typically your remanufactured transmission is not going to have a control housing or gear activation on it, which is going to be like a top cover. You'll have to take it off. And so that's what this particular procedure is showing you. In the event that the transmission, you have to have all these different boxes. You can order those from the dealership, and those are Volvo tools. Kind of expensive. Let's see. Do activation tests, gears tests. Something is a move replacement procedure. This is there used to be a test, maybe I'm thinking of something else here. There was a test where you would have to put the transmission for the clutch gear to remove it. Maybe they changed that. Hopefully they did. Different tests you can do. All right. Those are your tests. Poke around in there. Put it in the simulator if you want. It's a good idea too. I would recommend just put it in the simulator so that you can go in just look what it's doing. Okay, take it out of simulator, run the test. Put it in simulator if you want to see what it is. You have these little eye icons. As you're going through, if you need more information, that's what these are. Sometimes you'll see them up here. Just make sure you hit it. It gives a little bit more information. This one is actually interesting that they're using this one because you have to use an oscilloscope for this one, and it's using a pressure transducer. So ultimately, instead of us using like a manual gauge, we're using an electrical gauge. You connect them with your oscilloscope, and then you are testing from there. In the event that you don't even have premium tech tool, or that you want to use, you want to order a tool that's going to work across the line if you're working on test follows. We do have a kit with diesel laptops where it is an oscilloscope, it's going to have the pressure transducers, and you can perform the same test using the diesel scope. So, and again, that works with all the engine manufacturers. Pretty much, it's just a scope. It's just need the LC for diesel. Bottom function. And we'll get out of that for now. All right, calibrate. Ultimately, calibrations are going to need to be performed. Let's say I needed to do a BGT calibration. I'm changing out the turbo. Turbo is made by Holset. Holset is a company that is connected with Cummins. Cummins turbo on the bottom. All right. Then you must be removed. Position for installation and calibrate. Again, it follows if you've been working on Cummins pretty simple procedures. Stop when it's done and just follow the test. You have a rain sensor calibration, colon temperature gauge calibration, tap calibration. There's a lot in there. Just remember if it's in there, just remember. Oh, there we go. Transmission clutch pull and position calibration. So before you, if you have an I shift on a Volvo, you're going to have to put the clutch in the position for you to remove it. So ultimately, you have to go in there, choose your transmission, gives you the areas. Hit the I if you need more information, and then you'll just click the box, and away you go. Are we replacing software? Replacing the clutch. And it is telling me to central systems. Okay. And now you're ready to remove it. So there is a procedure to get that down. I always like to show you that because that might be something that you're interested in. There are a few actually accepted. All right. Do transmission calibration with it moved or with it in the truck, or level sensor. Yeah, just in simulated view, Check these out. I for information, and each one of these has its own little information. Be sure nobody is under the vehicle. Should be sleeping under there. Oh, programming. Everybody's favorite part. All right, so let's say we had to replace our control unit. We're going to replace our mid 128. Our ECM mid 220, 233 is going to be our after terminal control. They don't really say that there because they don't know where to put it. Now some vehicles only come with one module. They're using smart devices for everything instead of an ACM. So that's okay. We're going to go in. We're just running it simulated. If you ever wanted to run it simulated, just to go through the program to see what you're doing, then you're fine there. So here you download software and show commercial part number. You can just look at your commercial part number. Definitely you want to download the software. So it's going to ask you, are you replacing the control unit? Are you programming the control unit? Software package. You got some weird data in there. And I only want to put some new parts to the software package. Maybe there was an update. This one I'm just going to put some control unit. And away you want to go, just follow the prompts. It says, software you're about to program is chargeable. Program is performed using the software, and it goes general. Program will only be charged once, even if multiple reentries are needed. The software has a commercial part number, which is before. I'm sure somewhere, someplace, there's an invoice generated. I've never seen one. I don't know. I don't know. Well, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I really don't. I've never seen an invoice generated. Check me more. I just click OK, sure. Whatever cost we put on there, and even though it's simulated, it likes to make you. I wish it went that fast. The one thing you want to make sure that if you are programming, especially on a Volvo, you want to have it with a battery charger on. And if you don't, it could lose voltage during programming. There'll be some not so good things that happen. One thing you don't want to do is work in some environments or make it useless because you didn't have battery. Let's see. It's just now, let's say you have to do some framework programming. Okay. You're going to go into service and maintenance. You're going to and this is where you're going to be able to change road speed. If you notice, nothing pops up. Cool. All right. So you have a few different ways that you can look at it. This one, they break it down pretty good. This is fine. Look at your IDs. You can change your values and then next day. They'll say I need to change. Let's say I run in my customer road speed limit. I don't like my driver, but I don't want him to buy either. So I'm going to give him 67 miles an hour. Yeah. And cruise control, he isn't going to be able to set it until he reaches 30. You just click on the box, change it to what you will. Now, one thing you will notice is that it puts everything into a decimal point. You have to remember when you're dealing with programming and computer language, a lot of things talk in hexadecimals. Because of that, when you translate over, there's usually like some kind of fraction left over. Anybody that knows programming can explain that way better than I probably could. I'm just not at that level of disease, that kind of programming. But I do understand enough to know that a lot of these like point decimals that you'll see when you're doing programming is typically because you are just speaking computer language to computer language, and we have to decipher that into a language that we can understand. And sometimes there's going to be some leftover dollars, if you will, or leftover cents. Also, there is a communication, right? So what I mean by that is this truck was designed, ECM, electrical system, the architecture, everything was designed in Sweden. And in Europe, they don't use miles per hour, right? They use kilometers per hour. And they don't use inches and feet in the metric system. So we use the English imperial system. And you can always use imperial system to follow the American imperial system, which can get confusing. So ultimately, you just put in whole numbers. You're not going to argue anything. Once you change it, you hit continue. It's going to tell you add it. This is where you want it. Like you should programming. Uh-oh, you need a password. Typically, when you get a password, type in 4 zeros. If it doesn't work, type in 4. That doesn't work, try 1, 2, 3, 4. If the event that doesn't work, then pull the radio behind the radio in Volvo is where you're going to find the program. Unfortunately, somebody does like a little type in sticker you can just stick on the back. As the truck wears on, the sticker will fall back. Fall back, they'll just land there. So if you see the sticker behind the radio that is just laying on top of the iron bar, it has 4 digits on there. What I would do is honestly just take that sticker, put it on the back of the piece of wheelie cover, but it used to be password unless the company tried at that point. For the most part, most of the things click OK. I'm missing password. 1, 2, 3, 4 is the password. So you can take. I still do it the same way. 0, 0, 0, 0. That don't work. 1, 1, 1, 1. That don't work. 2, 3, 4. It's sadly that's just inverted. Once you hit continue, it'll do your programming. Okay, so you can also do it by mid view is what they call it. This is just my name. This is actually going by the ID. Anything that you see with this central system, you have to be connected to the teacher. If you don't understand any of this, don't try. Honestly, just don't do it. Don't even go there. Get a hold of somebody that does understand it. Call Volvo if you need to. Somebody wants you. Nobody wants you to hurt the truck. Nobody wants you to put the driver in position. As long as these trucks are laying on the road, they can get break. The break is that truck. We don't want to be the cause of a broken truck. Believe me, they do a good enough job breaking on their own, or the guy that's holding the steering wheel, or female that's holding the steering wheel, or whoever's holding the steering wheel can sometimes cause some issues too. The one thing you don't want to do is just be the person. All right, and so you can go in there and change these if you want. The biggest thing where it comes in handy is whenever you're setting. So if you notice, you do have all these different IDs. And you're not really getting into some of this stuff. Mostly, this is where you're going to have to go back and pull those documents. Right? There are those codes. Those are the same ones. It's giving you just a little bit more information that you're not going to see on the same exact codes. So just keep that in mind. If you need those worksheets, and you have to follow these worksheets. And there's a few other ones in there. You have to poke around on it. Just remember the end of the bodybuilder module, and that's where your ECU functions are planned. So you just want to make sure that you have that worksheet, whatever you want to call it. Because if you notice, there's not a lot of fortunately. And you have the mid max value limit, so you can go in and just hit max. Just be careful. So if you don't understand. You do have a template view. So if you go to template view, let's say that you have a fleet of trucks. Every time you get a new truck, instead of you having to go in and change all these individually, you can upload your templates. Or save them. I got a new computer, so all my templates are on. Let's say I want to enter a new template name. Lisa Daniel. Right. Lisa Daniel. And then you can go in there and change it and save it to. Right. It's all going to be based on what you put in. That one. All right. And then you hit save. So what I can do is I can go in there, set these for whatever I want, and then I can upload it to the vehicle and take it. I've never really had to do that without technician. It's just not simple. It's possible. And again, these are just different views that you can look at. So you think of these as like customer parameters, think of these as truck parameters. If you notice, they give you fuel percentage, and then fuel consumption calibration percentage. And then if you're changing injectors, so you do want to make sure. All right. So in the event that you are having to do some programming outside of not having the internet, what you can do is you can download. That's good. And you hit exit, it's going to have you powered off. And I'll show you how to switch on the power supply. Let's be honest. Again, that's just one of those communications. English. And I have to specify English guys. Just because English for important is trying to have a different version. And when you go into something. So let's say in the event that I am working on a vehicle not located on the side of the road. I know I'm on the internet. I can at least save that software to the computer. I'm going to go in, put the VIN number in, and then it's going to go in and it's going to save a software. So what it's going to do is ultimately going to open up this screen and choose what product you want. M stands just for the one know is new River Valley, Canadian truck. You ever seen M on a Volvo? And then you have to choose your electronics version 2, or you put the full Then you're going to choose what module you want to replace. And are you going to remember? Once you do that, you can do nothing. So I want to do these here. And let's say TCM. And on this one, let's just say unless there's not one, we want to. I'm just put it okay. So once you do that, you're going to send the order off to Simple Systems. It's going to tell you you're going to charge you fees. More almost wrapping up. I'll take it down in this section here. Look at your question. You have to go back. Then I'll answer those about it. So, if you have any questions, I know if you can go this is the Alright. Chelsea Metro can set up a video. I'm just gonna do it. What I basically mean is I'll probably fairly change this. I accept it. That's why it's Alright, so once we get downloading the software, it's going to come up with probably cover this. I don't know why you do that before me. I like to do something. So that's just what you look at it. You don't want to do parts of it. I want everything just because you can probably not really just doesn't not be. Alright. So we got available software. That is going to show you where that software is going to be used. Okay, so when you're going through your programming, you're going to do it just the same way. It's going to pull from here. After you do your programming, you see this little report button. Ultimately, you're just going to send the report. That basically is telling Volvo that yes, they use this particular software. I'm going to download it. And they're telling me it's free. I've never seen it. So, and if you need help on any of this stuff or anything like that, just go to X1 and you'll get a copy of the so you no longer have any available software. And it's not under use software in the event that I didn't click that button and I did programming, it'd be under use software. So that's basically it. At that point, we'll just hit finish work and we'll close out the code. And that just basically means that you're done with the truck. You just want to make sure you do that. With that. Not even like you just open up program and just to refresh. So I have a few questions on here. And I don't like I said, you'll get a copy of this presentation along with it. So you can and if you have any other questions, welcome back. So you don't have any questions, you're more than welcome to go and check out the webinar. Again, if you have anything specific, you can reach out to our training department. We do on-site training. as with Malcolm Volvo for 9 years. But I probably more than I wish I did something. From somebody that was a trainer on the time. Just donated Malcolm Volvo product until I got my hands in it and I realized it was. I see you have a question. Ultimately, you just talk out the question. I won't be able to get. And like I said, just whatever questions you have, just kind of if you have a question, please. For sure. I wish I could hear your voice. And wish I could, fortunately, anything I've been shown. I'm sure people are going. It's just, let's see, when pricing transmission from the with what would the steps be? Good question. I'll walk you through it right now. I like that question. Please, send me that question. Perfect. All right. So let's see. I'm going to walk you through that as a tool to my presentation. Okay. So we're going to go on here. Now remember, if it's a Volvo transmission on a shift and you are replacing it, then you're going to actually have to remove that transmission control module. It is part of the controller house. So you're going to have to remove the transmission. You're going to have to go in, do the calibration, or do the removal. Check. So it just takes a minute. Once it loads up, I'll show you where to go. Ultimately, what you're going to do is first, you're going to have to go in and do the removal procedure. Basically, to get the clutch out of the transmission geo set to work. If it is a transmission, excuse me, if it is a high shift point. The reason why this program is so slow is that's one thing because basically imagine if you were feeling it's hot. So ultimately what you're going to do is going to test actually I get this. Because what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to remove the transmission to move the TVC. There is a little cable under. You won't have to do it. But what you are going to have to do is you want to make sure that you are removing the transmission of you can actually mess up the TGCU pretty good if you don't open it. There is a cable. And there actually is a document if you want to do it. You can look this up again yourself. I'll look at the media. You saw how I messed up a minute ago. I-shift. Just remember that. Control unit gear selector replacement, VH from the MPT. This is the document that you're looking for. Yeah, you can even write down this document number if you want it. the service bulletin 432-05, RPB 766. All right, let's go select it. Good document. Yeah, we see. All right. Here's the document that it's going to tell you. It's going to tell you exactly what you need to do. Here's the entire bulletin. This is 2014. I believe this is going to be going to show you what lines to pick out. Here's your actual TCU when you drop it down. The difference here that you actually input. It's for the physical part of it. All thing you're going to need to do is when you do the programming on it. Programming is when you remove the control housing, just be careful when you lift it up. There is this cable with this little sleeve on it. But you have to lift the TVCU up towards the front of the transmission. In the event that you lift it back, this cable right here, but it rips open like a little piece of plastic. And then so just make sure you are lifting it up the right way. Disconnect that little connector, and then you'll be fine. Make sure you tighten it up the right way. And then I believe it tells you when to go. So at that point, it's supposed to see, and it will be a program. Simulated. Let's start. When you're replacing the entire transmission, if eventually you have to do a program, you would actually make the whole touch control housing with the TCU, and that would just continue to to how you do is if you see you're replacing the control unit, just hit play. You gotta make sure you have enough air in the truck because it does. And that's pretty much how you do that. Once you hit down, just hit exit. As far as programming, it's really easy. Just go in there, hit replace the unit. Any other questions? We got about 5 more minutes. So if you have any other questions, promise you there's no stupid questions. We never will. The only way we learn is to ask questions. Never think so. Somebody had a question. So, transmission and clutch calibration must be performed after the transmission is used. And you have to enable the tip to start. So I'll show you where the clutch calibration is. Down there, and we're going to go to calibration. Calibrate. Wait for it to load. Transmission. Clutch calibration. And you want to do one more thing installed. You don't do it. Think of it this way, you have to have transmission on. There is a way to do it if you have a vent. You have to have all those extra cables. You have to have an AB box, which is just a power button box. And then you just hit the power button. It'll be the conditions, make it be met. Hit continue. Replacing simple, have you done? What did you do? out of his TCU. Start engine. Wait 10 Volvo seconds, which is about 30 milliseconds. So you get Volvo seconds for just a little. And then they'll give you your ranges to make sure everything's calibrated. What you're doing is it's doing the calibration check, and it's basically checking all these little black points to make sure that they are. Don't worry so much about the number. It's just as long as they're within the ranges. All right. Any other questions? If you don't have any questions, let me go ahead and end it here. You'll get a copy of this once it's done. You can send out your email. You can watch it a few times. Do whatever you want to do. I appreciate your time today. I hope that you got something out of this webinar. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to our training department. It's going to be the same number as you call tech support, 888-983-1975, except training is option 3. Once you hit option 3, you'll get over to our training department. If you have a specific question, you're more than welcome to reach out to the training department or to me, and we will answer these questions to the best of our ability. I promise you, we're here for. We get up every day to help you. And that's because we didn't have anybody helping us. And we are just trying to make this job just a little bit easier for you so that it's easier to diagnose. I promise you, this is not money in the So, with that being said, have a good week. Be safe, be safe, be safe. You gotta have your hands, fingers, and toes to do this job. Other than that, I appreciate your time today. God bless you.